Thank you for joining us for The Drive Back, the movie podcast where we imitate our favorite thing to do after a movie, which is to talk about it on the ride home. My name is Garrett, and of course I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Adrian.
Salutations.
And today we've got another double feature for you, which are the episodes where we each select a film, we watch them both, and come back here to review them both with you. However, today we have a little bit of a twist, as you can see below me. So all of this and more is coming up on The Drive Back. As I said, on today's episode, we have a bit of a twist. We have a returning guest. Returning from last week's episode, we have Scott the Miniature Maniac from the YouTube channel Miniac. How's it going, Scott?
It's going great. Glad to be back.
Awesome. Yeah, through the miracle of video and audio technology, for those of you who are watching through video, we have the same costumes. Our production designer chose the same thing week after week, apparently.
Our costume department is really thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
They really are. You'd be surprised at my closet. It's just a lot of black t-shirts.
That exact shirt, you have like 10 of them.
I was like, Blackcraft, go ahead and give me 40 of them. But if you haven't watched last week's episode yet, please go and watch it. We had an awesome conversation with Scott about the hobby of miniature painting, films, how it coincides with film, and how they kind of leap off of each other. So as I said, the twist this week is that Scott has selected one of our movies, and Adrian and I have teamed up to select another movie. And we seem to have gone in a bit of a similar direction, at least with the kind of horror aspect. So let's go ahead and dive in. Scott, since you're a guest, we'll have you on for your movie first, which is Possessor. Released in 2020, it was directed by Brandon Cronenberg and stars Andrea Riseborough, Charles Abbott, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. An agent working for a shadowy organization uses brain implant technology to inhabit other people's bodies. When inside them, she commits assassinations for high-paying clients. This film was Scott's pick, as I said, so why don't you give us some general thoughts before jumping into some deeper spoilers?
I like how you reiterated that it was my pick, just in case it horrifies people. It's like, we didn't pick this. No, I'm just kidding. So Brandon Cronenberg, son of David Cronenberg. So the expectation going into this was that there was going to be some pretty good practical effects, inspired by movies like The Fly and stuff like that. So I'll just say that was the expectation, and it did not disappoint at all. It delivered very hard.
100%. And I also would like to point out, I want to thank you for also picking a horror film, because Garrett is not a huge fan, so I rarely get to sneak those in there. And this time we got back to back, which was pretty great.
It is worth it to mention, I do like horror movies when they're like the two we picked. And they're not reliant on jump scares, which are,
fair enough.
As I've said, a very horrible and cheap writing trick used by people who don't know how to scare people properly.
Fair.
But,
Fair.
So kind of on that same subject, I mean, this, before we get into spoilers, this is a very violent film. Necessarily so. I mean, it deals with assassinations and using people's bodies. And as you said, the practical effects are really the standout here. I think it's kind of safe to say that all three of us had an enjoyment of this film, and all three of us give, I would say, a tentative or a hesitant recommendation to watch it. It's definitely not something that if you are squeamish or if you don't like to see blood or gore, this might not be the film for you, but it is as much of a different experience as you could expect. I don't think I've seen a movie like this ever. So if you're looking for something different, something that's a little bit more of I don't want to say just like an artistic take on horror, because you also get artistic movies like The Lighthouse and Hereditary and Midsommar, but this one kind of feels more like indie, right?
Sure, yeah, I would give it that. And I do want to, before we dive into spoilers, I definitely don't turn away from films very often. I mean, in some of the crazier scenes in Midsommar, I definitely just was staring right at it. And even though everyone in the theater was looking away, this movie, as Garrett mentioned, I definitely was kind of shocked at some of the practical effect use and some of the things that I saw. So definitely, if you are that way, I would totally adhere to that advice.
Gotcha. So before we move on to spoilers, this is available for you to stream if you have a Hulu subscription. If you do not have a Hulu subscription, it should be available to rent pretty much anywhere else. But I believe the Hulu version is the uncut version, which simply has more of the violent scenes included. I'm pretty sure.
I did not know that.
Because I saw.
Is that true?
I think so, because I watched a recap afterward, like a Possessor explained thing. And the differences that were explained were visible in the Hulu version.
Okay. I had a little bit different experience. So I watched the Hulu one as well. And my buddy who watched it with me said that the uncut version had more genitalia in it and also more violence. And while I did see
that.
Genitalia, definitely. Yeah, there was more to it the way he described it. But maybe, who knows? I'm not sure.
I mean, it might be. I could be completely wrong. I just thought it was because it didn't have a rating on Hulu. So I thought. I could have been wrong. But
maybe it's unrated, but not uncut.
Who knows?
I mean,
maybe.
I think the reason I think if it is unrated, then it definitely is the uncut one because, the whole rating system is kind of weird and how they judge certain things. But yeah, I think that probably would be the uncut one then.
Yeah,
okay, well then we've seen that one.
I'm going to double check that really quick. But so let's go ahead and drop a spoiler warning for Possessor. I think all three of us say that it is a recommendation.
Yeah, especially with the ease of access to go watch it. You don't have to go out of your way. I think if you are into horror, this is definitely a movie to check out for 2021.
Yeah,
absolutely. So spoiler warning out of the way. One of the things that is advertised, because unlike you guys have mentioned, I watched the trailer before this. I always do because, I've got a marketing degree. I like to see when people market a movie towards me. And, it really hypes up kind of the violent nature of this. Do you think that with the blood and the gore, do you think is it too much? Is it not enough? Is it just the right amount? What do you guys think?
I think that a lot of people tend to lose sight of what horror films are supposed to be, which is horrifying. And for me, this movie was horrifying at several points. I think the violence was definitely necessary for that because it kind of just stepped on the gas and then it just didn't let go. It was almost, I don't want to call it traumatic to watch, but it was like it was trying, but not in like a negative way. It was like this is taxing me mentally right now because of how horrifying it is. And I feel like that is an element of horror that I want to find in horror movies.
I completely agree. And I think something to note also is I feel like a lot of horror movies, especially in this day and age, they try to appeal to a broader audience by panning away when those big violent moments happen. And they leave it up to your imagination to kind of assume what happened. And this movie definitely does not pan away. It almost pans into it. And I think part of that thing that makes it so uncomfortable is that it feels like what would happen. There's certain scenes that are just, it feels so real and it's stuff that you don't normally see. It feels taboo. And I think this movie did an excellent job without taking it to like that just overly grotesque level where you're just over it. I think it was a really, really good balance.
It kind of, for me, it kind of straddled the fine line between like the more, not sensible, but like I don't want to say underdone. I guess sensible is the right word, but like it kind of the nature that Midsommar did it, right? Like when the head hit the ground kind of thing. It straddled a line between that and like Tarantino over the top, but I feel like it did it in a way that benefited the film. Because the one thing that kind of went back and forth in my head was it necessary, right? Like I love blood and gore, I love violence and that kind of thing, but it has to be like necessary or earned to me. And this movie, like, I kind of went back and forth and thought, I was like, why didn't she just like walk up with the pistol and just, shoot him in the back of the head? Like, why did she have to like, make Swiss cheese out of him with a plating knife or whatever it was in the first 20 minutes? Exactly. But like, it's part of the story, right? She wants to make it more believable that like this person snapped and it was like, oh, that person just went crazy and started to kill him. Either that or the theory that I have seen all over the place is that she actually began to enjoy it when she was in those bodies, and she didn't actually go for the gun because it wasn't as gratifying as poking an eye out with the fire poker or whatever.
Yeah, I think I can definitely see both of those ideas. I think there's an important plot point to kind of describe, in that in the future there are probably, like, the government is probably aware of organizations that possess bodies for murder. And so when a shadowy agent does this, they can't just possess the body and then go and shoot the target. They need to live in the body. They need to kind of show some kind of story of mental decay to give it reason as to why the person might kill someone, which is what something me and my friend realized while watching it. We're like, what's the point? Like, why not just kill the person right away? And it's like, of course, you need to make it believable. And that's one thing that I also really like about this movie, is that it's a sci-fi movie and it doesn't spoon feed you details. And it's so subtle about it too. There was a moment when a guy came to recalibrate the agent inside of the male's body, and he said a phrase to the effect of, he said something, and he said, they always say this, X. And it's like, I've never heard that phrase in my life. But of course, in the future, they would have euphemisms that I haven't heard yet.
Or code words or things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was so cool. Just the subtle twist that made this such a believable sci-fi universe.
Yeah. And I think kind of to the point you said about how you have to tell a story if you're this killer inside someone else's body, they do address that in the same scene where he says, or she says, whoever says, can't you just kill me now? And they say, no, like, the story. It has to be in a public place that you were distraught and that you killed yourself. It has to follow the plot. Even to the point where everyone was suffering, but you have to follow that plot point in order to make it believable.
Because that also kind of harkens to the idea too that she doesn't want to leave. Like, she wants to keep doing it. Like, no, you need to take me out. And I think that's the reason why she could never pull the triggers, because she was either having so much fun or she was getting used to it or whatever that might be. I definitely think that's a strong case to be made as well. And kind of on the point you were saying about, like, the phrases and the code phrases being spoken about, like, snapping her out of it. It almost felt like, not like a direct inspiration or anything. It just feels similar to, like, the way that John Wick made its universe. Like, it just had things happen and expected you to, like, know, right? Like, the first time there's violence on, like, the Continental, and they're like, hey, don't do that. And they're like, all right, sounds good, right? And I love that kind of storytelling, that kind of environmental, situational storytelling. And this movie does it, I want to say, flawlessly.
Yeah, I think this movie would definitely be, I guess I could say like a masterclass on showing instead of telling. I think this movie, from beginning to end, showed you the world instead of having relatively lame exposition sections where they explain everything. Even to the very beginning, to not get super spoiler heavy, when she gets pulled out of a body and they just start reading off those things that she's supposed to identify with and be able to tell you what they are. They don't explain that process to you. You just understand it because they're visually showing it to you. And I think that it really, really excelled in that.
Wow. I didn't realize that. There was zero exposition almost at all in that movie. It's a good point.
Yeah, it was almost like conversations between the characters that didn't really tell you about what was going on.
Yeah.
And actually, a fun fact in the beginning, when she's going through the objects that are hers, and she gets to the butterfly, I think it is, or like a cicada. I don't remember what.
It's a butterfly. Yeah.
Okay. So when she prints it, and she's like, I still feel guilty about killing this or whatever. Like, I still feel guilty. At the end, she doesn't say that she feels guilty anymore. And that's her. The plot line running through the movie is that she is supposed to be Jennifer Jason Leigh's successor as, like, the director of the program. And I guess, at least from what I can deduce and what I've seen people talk about, is that is the last step. That was the thing that was holding her back, was the guilt.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think it had to do with her connection to her previous husband and child, right? Yeah. I think that's why she couldn't kill herself, actually, is because killing herself meant going back into that world. It meant having feelings, it meant having emotions. And I think she didn't want that. I think she wanted to be totally cut loose from humanity so that she could be the best murderer she could be, which is totally crazy because you never hear a character like that. You always hear the reverse of that, right?
Yeah,
I will say. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like a lesser movie, I feel, would have done this entire storyline in the first 20 minutes, had her come out after her family's killed in front of her, noticing it's the person next to her. She would kill that person and go on a revenge spree against the organization. A lesser movie would do that. This movie actually takes it and goes, no, that's what she actually wanted all along.
Yeah.
And that is just mind-blowing to me, that like that decision was made. It kind of leans into the more dark and disturbing nature of the film, definitely.
It was also, I do want to mention, mind-blowing to me at the end when the child also became possessed. And that scene was crazy. I felt like, again, that was going to be a moment where they panned away from some of those shots, especially where a child gets riddled with bullets. And they didn't. And I thought, again, for the integrity of the film, I thought it was an excellent choice to not do that. I think it really held up in the film, but it is very jarring, and they did some really crazy things.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, in terms of story writing, like the director possessing the child is like two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
So like you whack the husband and the child, both strings cut, and now you can live a totally remorseless life of possessing and killing people. It's like it's a super dark storyline, and it's totally unapologetic.
Yeah, and I kind of like that about it. The fact that it is a darker story. But kind of transitioning into another subject for me, kind of, and this is kind of a critique I have about the film, and I want to see if you guys kind of line up with this. For me, I kind of felt like everything in like the first act of the film, when she's in the first assassination plot, leading up to when she takes over, I forget the guy's name, Charles Abbott's character. When she takes over, then like the middle of this movie, everything that happens between her taking over the gentleman's body and him and her killing his boyfriend or his girlfriend and Sean Bean, unfortunately, again. I feel like the middle part of this movie is pretty dry and a little boring. Do you guys think it slugs a little bit?
At what point did you think it started to slow down? Like after, I don't know if Sean Bean actually died. It didn't show that.
I don't think he did. No.
Is it after Sean Bean got assaulted, or was it some other point?
For me, it kind of felt like as soon as she, I don't want to say as soon as she, like after her initial moments in the gentleman's body, like when she wakes up the next morning and notices all the things different in the bathroom, and has the awkward exchange with the girlfriend in the beginning. From that point up until the party when she attempts the assassination. So kind of everything that she did inside of Charles Abbott's body when he's going to work, and I mean there's little moments here and there, like the little like white fluff that she sees that disappears. Those are interesting, but like I feel like it just slugged a little bit through like that whole middle section. Is that just me, or did you guys think a little bit different on that?
Yeah. I at no point felt like I was bored. There was always something. There's always details to look for that were subtle, that implied something about the world. Whether it was like his job, which was like what the future of marketing looks like. That was super interesting. Yeah. The weird little anomalies were interesting. Kind of asking the question, why is this happening in the first place? Even the party that he went to with his girlfriend and all of her friends. Even just like the way they discussed things and the way they like held themselves was like just like I can see the world looking like this in 70 years or something like that. Yeah. So I was always kind of picking these things out.
Fair enough.
That and was enjoying a lot of it.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that it slowed down. I think I was very, very focused on kind of that double identity sense of living in someone else's life and trying to impersonate them. I think I was really focused on that. I can see what you're saying 1,000%, but I personally just didn't feel that.
Yeah, but I think it's good. I think it's good that you have a different opinion and that you're able to kind of, purport it, because I feel like I'm like totally on the hype train for this movie. And I kind of want someone to pose an argument as to like, talk me down. Yeah. So no, I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a personal thing, and maybe it wasn't even that long in the movie itself. It just felt like a really slow period. But that I don't want to completely critique it, because during those moments, the fact that Charles Abbott is playing Andrea Riseborough's character, playing him, is very well done, and I think Charles Abbott does an incredible job in this movie of portraying someone with two warring personalities inside of him. And also Andrea Riseborough does a very good job as well of conveying just how disconnected she is when she's outside of someone's body. Would you guys agree with that? Like, do you think because I feel like the performances in this movie are pretty stellar across the board.
I mean, just imagine the director talking to these actors, explaining what they need to do. It's like there is someone inside of you, and you need to act like they're acting like your character. And it's just like, how am I supposed to do that? Just so the challenge is just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And I think he did a great job. I loved it.
Yeah, especially the moments in the when he's in the bedroom of his girl. I don't want to say girlfriend, his friend that's a girl, and he's having the moment with, I think Eddie was the character's name, like the moments when he's kind of grappling with himself, and like Taz, I think is the girl's name, like it just felt so much more weighty to me. It was very interesting. Ooh. Did we lose him?
Yeah, Adrian seems to keep going in and out. Or at least his video does. I don't know if he's actually gone.
Yeah, I don't think he's gone. I didn't hear him leave. I mean, luckily this will be easy to edit out in the audio.
Yeah, because you had a good stopping point.
Yeah, it's kind of like
talk favorite.
People.
Yeah, we should talk favorite scenes.
Yeah, I'm down for that. I mean, I was kind of leaning into that with the kind of grappling between the two characters.
Yes,
but I'll get there in a second.
Yes.
the popping of the balloon, essentially.
Dude, yeah, that's my favorite scene in the movie is the two wills fighting.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was. I wasn't expecting the head to pop like a balloon. And it wasn't gory either. That's why I was like, what?
Yeah, and also just the cut between prosthetic and real actor was just it seemed so seamless that it was such a surprise.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Here I am.
So we were talking about performances, Adrian. How did you feel the performances were?
Absolutely fantastic. I loved the ability that the actors or the characters were able to convey that they had lived in this world far before we knew them. I think that was something that was really incredible, that it really brought life to the whole, I want to say, like, universe that they had built. Right? All this stuff isn't real, at least currently, that I know of. But I think they really did a good job of making it seem like, oh, I'm very experienced in this. I'm very familiar. And I think they did a great job. I loved even some of the more violent scenes. I thought the acting definitely held up.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to touch on before we kind of move on to the next topic is kind of talk about how this world has felt lived in and, just like it's existed before. Did you guys notice the interesting details? Like, all the cars seem to be like 1950s or 1940s looking cars. And a lot of the tech, except for like the actual brain implant one, looked pretty old.
I definitely noticed the aesthetics choice of kind of what they were going for, but I did not notice the cars. That's really interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I did not notice the cars either.
There was a moment when Taz, I think is what her name is, leaves the corporation headquarters, like after she does the first assassination, and she walks out to a car, and it's like a 1940s looking car. It took me aback for a second because I was like, okay, we're doing a different kind of aesthetic choice. It almost reminded me of the movie Her a little bit, where it was kind of like that retro futuristic. But maybe that was just a callback to Brandon Cronenberg's father.
Or maybe this takes place in the same universe.
That would be horrifying. Two sides of the same coin. But let's go ahead and talk like any particular memorable scenes. Were there any particular moments in this movie that stood out to you, like any one over the other?
Yeah, definitely. I think the one that I keep going back to is when the two wills of the two people are fighting on the bed, and the male character is strangling the assassin, and then her head just pops like a balloon.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's really strong. I feel like it was a really strong scene. Just the idea of two warring human wills fighting, like it's so like I don't know if it's ephemeral or it's so spiritual. So that was awesome. But also the cut between real human head and balloon was so instantaneous that it just
Yeah.
like it was totally unexpected.
Yeah, that scene was absolutely jarring. I mean, even though I was watching it, it caught me so off guard. I found myself kind of like jumping back.
Yeah.
Like unintentional horror. I mean, well, intentional.
Oh, intentional,
but
just
unintentional.
not to me. I didn't intend for it.
Kind of to break away. I mean, I think that moment's fantastic. It's probably my favorite moment in the movie. The other one that I'm thinking about, as we've been talking about how Taz, I think is, I keep thinking that's the character's name. I think it's Taz. Is kind of losing grips with reality and is coming back to the idea of like, you know, being in someone else's body is more what she wants to do. There's the moment when the character she's inhabiting is making love to his girlfriend, and it's a sex scene in their bedroom, obviously, but she's in this person's body and she's going along with it, and even more, she's like, you know, she's having a good time doing it. Whereas you flash back to the moment when her and her estranged husband are doing the same thing, and she just looks like, you know, just like a plank sitting there, you know, getting everything done to her. Like that really stuck out to me because, like, again, that whole narrative, she's more at home in someone else's body. She's more at home taking these contracts and assassination missions than she is in her own skin, than her own
And
body.
the more that we talk about that kind of boring versus exciting thing, it keeps making me think about a scene in the beginning where she's talking to her ex-husband and he asks her how her work trip was, and she says boring, like nothing really happened. And it almost starts to seem like her not working are the boring vacations, and she keeps wanting to go back to work. So it almost is like a little bit of a flip that I feel like I'm now picking up on.
Yeah, I definitely didn't notice the two. I didn't put together the two sex scenes and how she was different in both of them. That's really cool. But also, like, obviously, this person is shedding her humanity. I feel like it's almost natural due to her line of work. But when she goes back to visit her husband, she's also like reciting lines. Like she has to try to sound normal to these people. So yeah.
That was also creepy in itself, her just reciting the lines. And it kind of made me think about, because I don't really do that, but it made me think about times that I may have done that and been like, especially when you're going to get your name called in class.
Yeah.
You have to go here, and you go like, here. Here.
Absolutely.
I know it sounds like I nailed the intro to this podcast every single time, but I definitely practice it at least once or twice before we actually record. Usually in the car on the way to work.
I did want to mention one of the scenes that really stuck out to me was the fire poker scene with the eyeball specifically, and then going through the mouth. And for those of you that are listening, I'm not going to describe it in detail because that's not fun. If you're not ready for it, but that scene definitely had me kind of like wince a little bit because, again, I'm not used to really seeing that on screen. Most people look away, but this was very shocking and really well done. I think it looked really, as far as I know, really realistic.
The only way that could have been worse is if Colin was his name, or the assassin took the poker out of a red hot fire. But otherwise, it was absolutely brutal.
Would that have been worse? Because it would have cauterized.
I guess so.
Your brain. I don't know if that's better.
I mean, it prevents the bleeding, I guess.
I will say that in any horror film, when somebody picks up a fire poker, I get so nervous for whoever is not holding the fire poker.
Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb in life in general too.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just sitting there at like your house, and all of a sudden your aunt picks up the fire poker, and you're like, who's it gonna be?
I'm no longer in that house if that happens. I have left the building.
We don't go over there for Christmas anymore, is what happens. Spoiling the next movie. But so kind of bringing this down again, I mean, obviously, Scott, you said you're on the hype train for this movie. You know, and I've already kind of mentioned a critique of this film. Are there any critiques that you guys have for this film? Anything you wish maybe could have been handled better, or maybe could have been done better? Because I don't know if this is Brandon Cronenberg's first movie. I don't think it is. If it is, it isn't. It's a big step for a first film, but
yeah.
Like, is there anything that you think off the top of your head that you would critique about this film?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this, but the person who watched with me said it. This lady is legendary at what she does. There was a point when one of the characters said how he appreciated one of her previous kills and how she was legendary and whatnot. And she was identified as being acting strangely the moment she entered Colin's body. And my friend was like, "You think if she was so legendary, she'd be better at like hiding this?" He also mentioned that it seemed like you would take months at like kind of researching someone's life before like jumping into it. And the way the cut works is it seems like she spends very little time researching, but that could have been the edit because it is kind of a shorter movie. It's an hour, 44 minutes long.
Yeah.
So I didn't agree with those points necessarily, but those were some good critiques, I think.
I can definitely see what that person is saying. I feel like they showed a little bit of it, like one of those super quick montage of here's me doing this part.
Yeah.
But I think like part of that would have been to kind of assimilate into that person's life in a more like regular manner. Maybe you get a job where they work. Like you would start to kind of familiarize yourself on a more personal level and understand how they like what do they do at work? Where do they go? You learn their whole schedule. And I do see that. I don't think it hurt the movie though. I think what they did show was enough to fulfill the point of what they were trying to get across.
Yeah, and staying kind of on the, not copying the Friends critique kind of thing, but like a potential critique that I could see from someone watching this, I have two. I feel like some people would mention that this movie feels very slow, or maybe more kind of a slow burn compared to other modern horror movies. Because I've seen this movie compared to Upgrade, which I don't think is a good comparison at all. And I think that kind of puts a false idea in people's heads, like, oh, it's going to be an action movie with lots of killing. I can see people saying it's slow. I don't personally think it's slow. I'm not saying that's in my critique of the film, but I can see some people like, the horror fans out there like, I just watched Annabelle 1, 2, and 3 or whatever. It's time to put on Possessor.
Boy, are you in for a treat if that's the cadence that you're following.
I want to be in the room when that person watches it. But the other one that I could potentially see, again, not my critique, is that this movie is a little too artsy, right? It's a little too indie. It's a little too show not tell. But personally, I think that's the charm of it, right? Like it's show not tell. But I know to get off topic for a second, another great scene is the mind melding between Colin and Taz, and you see like the bodies melt away and then like reform.
Oh my gosh!
Great visual.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's practical or CG.
Practical.
I think that was practical, 100%.
Those are wax bodies, and they're melting them, and they're playing it in reverse and flipping the footage, so it looks like the wax is coming up into the body.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's practical.
I think they did a great job at because the first I could immediately tell like, oh, wax bodies, 100%. That's what that looks like. But then they flipped it, and you could see it falling or coming up onto the other person, and it really sold it. And then similar to the kind of head popping transition you talked about, the swap between the practical wax effect and a real human hand was so instantaneous that it was fantastic.
Yeah. I think it's important to mention the critiques that you're saying because, I mean, everyone's different. Their attention span is different. The pace they want in a movie is different. When I think of slow burn, I think of The Witch. I think of Hereditary. To me, both great movies. To me, this didn't feel like a slow burn, but it definitely is different than like AAA horror movies like The Conjuring and stuff like that, which is also a good movie, but for different reasons.
Yeah, this is definitely art house style.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely a different feel altogether.
This is more in the vein of like Hereditary and The Witch and like that kind of. It's not A24, but it kind of feels like it could have been A24.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, there was like 1 million publishers on this film. Like the beginning scene, I was like, I've never heard of any of these.
You literally
split up into like 12 different publishers.
I was literally about to mention that as a critique for this film, and you just read my mind. It was literally a Family Guy cutout gag. Like, oh, is this the movie? No. Okay. No. Is this the movie? No. And then they replayed them all. throughout like the actual
Yeah.
film intro.
Yeah, they let us know
Yeah.
again that all these people did it.
Yeah. Brandon's like pulling together all the strings to get this movie done.
Yeah. Hey, it worked. He made it. I personally feel like he made a really good product.
Absolutely.
I like to think that somewhere out there, this is the truth, that all these studios at different points gave money and helped with the production, and then every single one got up to the child killing scene, and we're like, we're out. And they had to keep all of the all the studios on there because they're like, well, they put money into it. I don't think that's the case, but I just think that's absolutely hilarious to think about. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about for this film before we move on to our second pick and our scores for this one?
I'm ready to rate this bad boy.
Anything for you, Scott?
No, I'm good.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and move on to our scores for this film. Scott, since this was your pick, you can go ahead and give your score first.
Okay. I've never done this in the history of reviewing films, but I'm giving it 10 out of 10. I loved it.
All right.
Wow. Okay. I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Basically, I asked, can I think of anything wrong with this film at all? And from my point of view, I couldn't. So I gave it a 10.
I love that. It's wonderful when you find a movie like that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's not many 10 out, or not many 100% that we've given out.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I think I've done 2, and Adrian's given 1.
I did. I think what did I give it to? I don't remember.
You gave Soul 100.
Oh yeah, great movie.
That's a great movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in a similar boat. I don't want to say that like the negatives or the critiques we talked about took away from the film in any way. But I definitely I don't think I could give it my 100. I feel like I reserve those for like the most cream of the crop. And while this was very close, I gave this a 9.7 or a 97. I thought this was really, really a damn good movie. I thought it was super entertaining. And again, the use of practical effects probably gave it an extra 1,000 points.
All right.
So what is this, 1,097? I don't know. But I just thought we don't see that much in today's age. And when we do see practical effects, they're very subtle and more kind of in the background. And to see them up in the forefront again in film is really, really inspiring. And I hope he continues to do things like this.
Yeah, I hope that he continues doing more movies like this because it was awesome. Getting in my score, I ended up giving it an 87. Not for any particular reason, like I didn't like it or anything like that. For me, the thing that kind of takes the most away from it is that I don't feel like this is a movie that I would go out of my way to watch again. Like, it was an absolutely awesome experience in practical effects, in show not tell storytelling. It's fantastic. I just think like it's not one of those ones that I would buy on 4K. It's not one of those ones that I would tell my friends, I'm gonna watch this one tonight. You should too, right? I don't know. It just doesn't have that staying horror potential. I don't know.
I hope it's talked about in the same way that Hereditary and Midsommar were. I think it should be. I hope to see it kind of make the circuit rounds in the near future. Yeah, but I agree. I don't necessarily know that it will, just based off of kind of where it released and how it released.
I definitely see this as becoming kind of like, I don't want to say a cult classic, but one of those ones that's kind of like the film buffs in horror will kind of lean on this one. Kind of like, I would argue The Witch is kind of similar because it wasn't like that big of a theatrical release, but a lot of horror fans really like it. So maybe it's in that same vein. I don't know.
Yeah. Talked about in the quiet circles of horror fans. You'll hear whispers of it for years to come.
And the best horror groups out there, you gotta take it and you gotta watch it right after any of the Annabelle films. That's your challenge.
Okay.
From one to the other.
I'll try it out.
Yeah, let us know, please. How does that go?
Get a little whiplash.
Even better would be like you go from Killer Clowns from Outer Space to this. It's just such a coin flip. Let's go ahead and move on to Adrian and I, our combined pick, which is The Lodge. Released in 2019, it was directed by Severin Fiala and Veronica Franz, and stars Riley Keough, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Jaden Martell, and Richard Armitage. A soon-to-be stepmom is snowed in with her fiancé's 2 children during a snowstorm. As time stretches on, though, more weird and worrying events occur through and around the house. So this Adrian put this pick forward. I had never heard of this movie. Again, which seems to be a running theme with this episode.
Well, they're horror movies, so I don't think you keep an ear out for them.
Like, it's more of an artsy one, so I thought I would have at least heard of it. But Adrian, what did you think about this movie? Because you were the one that really wanted to watch this, right?
Yeah, I had heard rumblings about this movie last year in 2020 from a couple of friends that just said, "Hey, you should check it out," and it wasn't available for stream yet, or at least it was like you had to rent it, or it was some other thing. I couldn't watch it, and I kind of forgot about it for a little bit, and then it came up again. It kind of was brought up as, "Hey, have you seen this?" And I hadn't, so I really wanted to watch it. And no spoilers, I had a really good time with this movie. Also, I felt like we kind of hit two really good strides with this double feature.
All right. Yeah, I mean, this movie was. The one thing I will say about this movie is that this movie is disturbing, but not in the same way that Possessor is. Like, Possessor is more disturbing on a brutal, violent level, whereas this one is a little bit more psychological. And I'll delve into what I mean by that in the spoiler section of this. But I think it was like my brother and I watched this. He came over. We had like a little, dinner night together, and I was like, "Hey," because he's been watching horror movies, and I'm like, "Let's watch The Lodge." And two things happened by this. Number one, we were depressed by the end of this movie, and number two, it was oddly freezing inside my house or my apartment, which was weird.
That's ghosts. That's ghosts in your house. that's what that was.
Either that or my renter didn't put on the heater for once.
Definitely ghosts.
Definitely ghosts. I agree, 100%.
But I'll get more into my thoughts as we get into the spoilers. But Scott, what did you think of The Lodge? Because you said you'd seen this before, right?
Yeah, I have. When I watched it, I was like, this reminds me so much of Goodnight Mommy. And then I just looked at the director, and she did Goodnight Mommy.
Wow.
So that made sense. But yeah, I liked it. I'm glad that I watched it. I probably won't ever watch it again.
I'd agree.
It's kind of like Possessor for me. Like, it's kind of happy you watched it, but then like now that it's over, maybe not so much.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because there's a particularly tough scene in the beginning, which we'll dive into when we get into spoilers. But real quick, as with Possessor, this movie is available to stream on Hulu if you have a subscription. It's also available to rent across various different platforms like Amazon, Microsoft, whatever you use. So let's go ahead and drop a spoiler real quick. A big old spoiler bomb, because there is a pretty big twist in this movie.
Yeah. Which I didn't see coming at all.
Let's hop right into that, because I want to discuss that. What did you guys think of the twist? The fact that she's not, and again, spoiler warning, like we said, the fact that she is not, in fact, going crazy, she's not being stalked by a cult, that it's the kids messing with her the entire time.
I thought it was pretty good, but I mentioned when we talked about Saint Maud at some point, I do like occult religious films, and I did really like the elements of the painting of the nun, and I kind of wish that I got to see a little bit more about that backstory with that character, because she was like super interesting, like the whole like self flagellation thing, or mutilation. That was super cool. So yeah, it was a good twist. I didn't see it coming, but I kind of wanted her to be a crazy religious zealot.
Yeah, I think that's something this movie did really, really well, is I kind of wanted both things to be happening simultaneously. I wanted it not to be real because I didn't want everyone to be dead. But then I also wanted it to be real because I was so interested in this afterlife mentality of what was going on.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it. I hated the twist.
Oh no!
Like I was actually disappointed. Like I remember the fact that they opened the door and everything was in there. I just looked at my brother and I was like, really? I don't want to say hate it. I disliked it. I was disappointed.
No, lean into it. You hated it.
Tell us how you feel.
Abhorred. No,
I'll have my own conversation about how good it was over here.
I don't know. I was expecting something. I don't know if I was expecting something supernatural, and that was kind of the lack of expectation I had. I watched the trailer before this, I didn't know where it was going. I thought maybe it's going to be something with a cult. Maybe it will be supernatural. Maybe it will be a proper, like you said, a religious zealot film, and it actually has religious tones to it, kind of like the movie Apostle, or like Saint Maud looks like it has, which I haven't seen it yet. And that's why I guess I was kind of disappointed, because I haven't seen Goodnight Mommy, which is the same director, but it kind of feels similar, because I think the kids were messing with the mom in that one as well.
Yep.
But so like, at the end of this movie, I just turned to my brother and said, I'm never having kids."
Wow, this is what did it for you, huh?
That and working retail for almost 10 years, I absolutely hate children.
I do want to point out that I do feel like there is the big twist that we're talking about, which is that the kids were doing it the whole time. But there is kind of another very small twist that happens where they are all going to sleep and they use a gas heater inside the apartment or inside the cabin. And I think with the reveal of that, like maybe they're dead, I think is kind of a twist, because they kind of go on for a little bit without knowing that.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of starts. I didn't pick up on it, at least until like a little bit. Maybe that was just me. But I thought that was one of the high points of the movie, is when you find out that they may be dead. And I thought the movie got really fascinating at that point. And then the other twist happens where it kind of reveals that. But maybe that was just a twist for me, but I definitely didn't see that like happening. I got nervous when the gas heater came in. But I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. I felt like the movie had a lot of, I don't want to call them twists, but maybe like misdirections in it, just in general.
Sure, maybe that's a better word.
Yeah, because like the soon-to-be mother-in-law, like she was kind of like an unknown character to these children, and they were kind of like, tiptoeing around her, and she was kind of tiptoeing around them as well. And it was like one big misunderstanding that just erupted in like the worst way possible. But because of that kind of that story, there was just kind of like twist after twist in the whole story, and that was kind of cool, that interaction.
Yeah, I think misdirection is a better word than twist, because I definitely didn't see a lot of these little turns coming.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to bring up, because I see a lot of comparisons between this movie and Hereditary, particularly for two reasons that stick out to me the most. Number one is the model house. And
yeah.
The fact
low-hanging fruit, sure.
Yeah. But also the fact like the daughter has like, she's not like a normal child kind of a situation. I mean, not that the daughter dies in this one, but I've seen
spoiler for Hereditary.
Well, we've talked about it enough. That doesn't spoil a lot of the movie, but like a couple of comparisons to Hereditary, which I don't think are very fair. Like, it's kind of a dumb question at this point. Do you think they kind of ripped off that idea from Hereditary, or like, do you think it was an original decision at the time?
I didn't feel like, when I was watching it, I wasn't like, wow, this is like Hereditary, because Hereditary has this super interesting, like, it's like a different kind of movie in the first half than is the second half. Has this kind of cool thing going on there, and this one's kind of more like transparent the whole way through in terms of like what kind of like storyline it is. But now that you mentioned some various like details about the story, yeah, there definitely is some kind of similarity.
I think there's a similarity too in that it kind of tries to deal with family dynamics. Hereditary has a lot to do with like the social aspect or the family social aspect, and how that weighs on people and the ebb and flow of that. And this one kind of does that. Yeah, I do think that the model house is a low hanging fruit. I mean, I get it. I agree that I didn't think that while watching it. I can see it now that you've said it, maybe. But yeah, I definitely didn't pick that up.
It's not a criticism I have, to be fair. Like, it was a similarity, and I don't want to say it's not a copy, because like you said, Scott, you weren't sitting there watching it going, "This is Hereditary," right? It just felt similar. I mean, people use recurring motifs all the time in film, and no one says that it's a copy.
Yeah.
But kind of transitioning, kind of similar to what we talked about with Possessor. Did any of you have any like favorite moments in this film? Any favorite scenes that stood out to you?
Yeah.
You
go ahead.
No, you can go. You go.
Okay. One thing. So I again did not watch anything prior to this movie. I just had friends say, "Hey, have you watched it?" So I watched it. Had no idea where the story was going, and I thought at the beginning it was going to be like, oh, troubled household, they're going to like come to terms in the lodge, wherever that is, like it's going to be that. And then when the mom sits down at the table and, massive spoiler, just puts a gun in and kills herself, I was totally caught off guard and shocked by that, in the best way. I think it really set the tone for the film. And then the whole thing of the new mom or the new girlfriend coming in was very horror-esque to me. Like, I was very scared of what was going to happen. So I think that might be my favorite point, is when they kind of set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate to have a very positive mental attitude. And sometimes a person like me doesn't understand the concept of suicide. But watching that scene, I was like, for one of the first times in my life, I was like, I can relate to why you would feel like this is your only option. So from a writing perspective, that was cool. A scene that I really liked is when the soon-to-be mother-in-law is she's like sitting by herself in the table in the cabin, and she keeps seeing the vision of what I assume might be like some nun who was maybe harming her in some way, and she's harming herself in like a flagellation sense for for her sins or her crimes or whatever, with like hot coals and fire. That was brutal.
That was rough.
Yeah.
And I mean, I kind of hate to copy Adrian, but that first kind of display of how this movie was going to be different was a huge one. And I think compared to a lot of other films, it was probably the most realistic scene I've seen of someone putting the gun in their mouth and shooting himself. You know, people don't fly backward and there's no bright red spray, right? It's a sudden jolt, and then it's just the body goes limp, right? Go ahead.
And I think that's something that has to do with kind of what made that scene so powerful, at least to me, is that it wasn't over the top, and it did seem so realistic that it just made it was a mix of very sad and also kind of this understanding of what had just happened. They didn't blow it out of proportion in any way that made you feel like, oh, that was crazy or anything. It was just I don't want to say mundane, but it was so simplistic in what had happened, which I feel, again, I'm also fortunate enough to not really understand it, but it definitely resonated as kind of maybe one of those oh shit moments of that's what happened. I think that's what made it so powerful.
But to really talk about the scene for me that stood out the most, and again, I always kind of default back to the climax scenes, right? Like in Possessor with the Battle of the Wills, I guess you could say. For this, or my favorite scene was toward the end when the father comes back to the house and is talking. I don't remember the character's name, but the soon-to-be stepmother, talking her down from where she is, and seeing the level of care in him was very interesting, right? He didn't he wasn't getting angry. He wasn't no, don't, no. He was taking it very calm and was actually kind of bringing her down from a ledge. It kind of reminds me from people who talk people down from earlier committing suicide, right, or doing something atrocious. There was love and care in his voice, which was kind of rare to see in a movie for me, and I think that stood out to me. And then obviously it leads up to her not dropping the fantasy and shooting him, which is weird because she puts the gun to her head and it clicks, it doesn't fire.
Yeah.
And then she aims it down at him and fires it, and it goes off. Now,
that's actually, go ahead.
I was gonna say that it seemed kind of weird to me. At least as far as I know, I'm not a gun person in any way, shape, or form. But as far as I know, with a revolver, once you fire a round, that bullet's used. It doesn't just sit there and go, hey, I'm back. When you pull the hammer back, the next it moves on. The cylinder rotates. So if she had already fired one shot, I don't remember when she did at that point. Maybe it was left over from the day when she and the father were shooting out in the yard. It doesn't make sense that there wouldn't be a bullet there, and then it wouldn't have moved on to the next one. Does that make sense?
It does. It could have just been that the barrel spun unintentionally and was on an empty chamber,
or a misfire, I guess.
Yeah, But I did want to point out something about that scene that I also loved, and maybe you guys will agree with me, but I spent a lot of the movie very worried about the children and their lives and whether she was going to murder them. And then you realize that, oh, it's all fake, and you're still a little bit worried. And then the dad comes in, and then you're worried about the dad, and then the bullet doesn't fire, and then you're going, wait a second, is this what's happening? And then it actually happens. So I feel like the movie did a great job of saying, we know you're worried about this person. Let's take care of that. You're not worried anymore because the bullets aren't firing. And then we're going to kill him anyway. And it really kind of catches you. I don't want to say off guard again, but it does. Like, it kind of just shocks you again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And kind of elaborating on that, I do think that the movie, and it is a short film. Again, it's like Possessor. It's like an hour and 40 minutes. I definitely think it could have cut when she walks out to the car and the kids are there. I feel like it could have ended there instead of going to the fact, like, you know, they're sitting around the dinner table and they're all singing or, you know, chanting the hymns or whatever. I feel like that was a little, like, it's not a major critique in any way. It's not like taking points off for me, but I just kind of felt like it could have been a little bit more tasteful at that point. Like, you don't know what she does.
Yeah. Scott, did you feel that this had sinister vibes with the found footage kind of portion of the flashbacks to like the cult aspect that she used to be in, where they were filming in like the tape over the mouths? No?
No. So
Okay.
like, again, it's kind of another situation where now that you've mentioned it, I do realize it, but while watching I wasn't like, oh, this is kind of like Sinister. But yeah, I guess it is similar in that way, but I wasn't thinking it at the time.
Fair enough. I don't think I thought about it while watching it either. I was more thinking about it while we talked right now.
Sure.
But I definitely got very, like, looking now, I feel like it, and Sinister I thought was pretty good as well. So I thought that was a really good touch to the movie.
Yeah.
I appreciate you posing the question to Scott and not to me.
Oh, it's okay. We just went back and forth for a couple beats, so I wanted
seen
to.
Sinister, so.
I'm curious what you
I'll
guys think
pretend
about
I
the
knew
pacing.
Oh,
How'd you like the pacing of this film? Did you feel like this was another slow burn? Was it constantly engaging you? Were there portions where you were not as excited?
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I actually, again, my fear for the children's lives, I think similar to Possessor and kind of the inhabiting the body aspect kept my attention. I was constantly worried about the little details of, is this real? Is this not? What's actually happening?
Mm.
I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna say that it was a little slow for me. Particularly, like, you know, Possessor is a slower film. It's not incredibly fast, but it still held my attention the entire time. Whereas with this one, I felt like my attention drifted away a couple of moments, and it was particularly when, like, you know, when they were just sitting around the house doing things, like when they're watching films late at night, and you know, little moments like that. And the moments that caught my attention are like when it cuts back to its nighttime and the dog's sitting in the bed and it starts growling, and you see like the edge of someone disappear. Like, those are the parts that I'm like, ooh, something's happening. But then it just cuts back to kind of nothingness, and moments like when I'm never gonna remember the characters' names, and I said I'm a font with useless information. When Riley Keough's character, the stepmom, makes her walk out into the snow and gets to that odd cross-shaped building in the middle of nowhere and comes back, that felt completely pointless to me. like
That's fair.
Like, there was someone in the window, and it looked like it looked like it was probably the cult leader.
Yeah.
I think, or it looked someone similar, and I was like, ooh, this would be really cool. Like, maybe this was like a cult like facility. This is back before the twist happened, you know. So I'm like, you know, trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm like, is this like a cult facility? Like, is this like a safe house, or like, what is it? And then just nothing happened, and I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, it seemed. I kind of felt a similar way. It felt like the movie was kind of stringing me along for the sake of it, and I was just kind of like. So, fun fact: I've actually watched this movie 3 times. The first 2 times I watched it, I did it mistakenly at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I fell asleep both of the first 2 times. I mean, which is not like really like a dig at the movie at all.
I have a question. How do you accidentally watch The Lodge at 3 a.m.?
It's horror movie marathons. It was like
Oh, okay.
the last movie in the run.
I've never been
And
like, whoa, I put the movie on.
yeah, it's 2 a.m. Let's go. Yeah, mostly just friends egging me on. But yeah,
Sure.
both times I was kind of sleepy and kind of fell asleep. And then I watched it again the third time at a normal hour, and I kind of felt the same way. I felt like I was being stringed along for the sake of kind of trying to create some kind of menace or dread, and I wasn't feeling it at all points. Whenever I kind of feel like whenever I am watching a movie and I realize I'm not engaged, I feel like that's always kind of like a red flag for me, and that happened maybe like 2 points in this movie.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think I necessarily felt like I disassociated with the film at any point. But I can definitely see that critique for sure. I was also very focused on the impressive aspect of the prank that the kids did pull of removing everything in the house overnight. And then somehow, maybe you guys saw this and I didn't. How did she wake up in the snow at the same time when they removed everything from the house? Did they carry her? The girlfriend or the girlfriend?
Yeah, this is some grade A air mattress in the middle of a lake pranks right here.
They took her like miles into the snow for the prank. So dedication, this would have been at least a 10 million prank on YouTube if this was recorded.
Are you talking about when she wakes up and sees the cult person under the ice? When she wakes up in the middle of the lake and she's looking in the ice and there's like the cult member down there or whatever.
Oh, maybe I didn't notice that. I'm talking about so they have the gas heater and they're watching the movies and they fall asleep and you're worried about like gas in a contained room, not good. And then the next scene is she wakes up in like the middle of the lake and doesn't know why she's there.
Yeah, I thought that's when she wakes up and sees the cult person in the lake. I thought that
maybe
was one
I
of her
just
hallucinations.
Oh. I don't know. See, this movie has me guessing still. Here I am.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was during the hallucination point, but I might be wrong.
I don't know.
That was
But
one of the moments.
an intense prank nonetheless I think if you did that, like you went to a Lake Tahoe cabin or something with your friends and in the middle of the night you took every single thing out of the house. I mean, honestly, yeah, that's ridiculous, but you got to applaud the effort. I mean, that's pretty incredible. And then the fake piece of newspaper, how did those kids print out a fake obituary?
It didn't even look like a newspaper or it looked like, here's Microsoft Word. I got it to function into 4 different columns. Like, the fact that she was just like, is that real? It's just
She was off her pills though, whatever those pills were supposed to do. She was not firing on all cylinders, the movie would have us believe.
True. But anything else you guys want to talk about? Any particular things you want to bring up?
I'm trying to think if I have any big critiques of the film. I think my critique would just be the actual premise of what happened. While I did enjoy it, I think it was kind of ill-founded and it didn't really resonate. Like, I agree with both of you that I won't watch this again. Scott, I feel like you definitely won't. You've seen it 3 times now. I feel like that's probably enough for you. I definitely don't see myself watching this one again. I can see myself recommending it to people if they're looking for something a little kind of more casual. Maybe they're not as ready for the horror that the Possessor has, but they're ready for something different. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, I've recommended this movie a couple of times just because I've talked to a couple of people who like horror movies and they haven't seen it. Because I think, for horror fans, I think it's worth a watch. Kind of another. I don't want to say it's a bait and switch with like having no jump scares or anything like that, but it's just different enough that I can recommend it to horror fans. I don't know. This isn't really a movie I'd recommend to like general film goers.
Yeah,
it's definitely a tough watch.
I would say I used to consider like The Witch, Hereditary, and Midsommar were like these 3 elite horror films that I would always tell people like, oh, if you love horror, like these are like very unique ones that you should go watch. And I will say that I think Possessor has joined that list of very eclectic horror films that I would recommend. And this one, I want to say, is like list adjacent. Like, I don't know if it might be like if someone says any other films, I might say it. Maybe, but definitely the first one has joined that list.
Yeah. It's like, I don't want to call it a B-list horror movie because that term carries its own weight.
Mm-hmm.
List adjacent was a good way to describe it. It's kind of like a movie you'd watch if you're into the genre of horror, but not one that you would like sample if you wanted to kind of understand what the genre was about, maybe.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
That's a great way.
The best way to describe this movie is it's one of the ones that I guess there's two ways I can say it. Number one, the fact that I can recommend a horror movie to horror fans and they haven't seen it kind of makes me feel
it's always fun.
A little bit above them. It's like, hey, you haven't seen this, you should watch it. But the other this is one of those movies that I think it released in theaters. I could be mistaken, but if it didn't, it could have been a straight to streaming one. Like this could have been like a Netflix original or like a Hulu original.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't have been able to tell, right?
I think it was.
And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, it's just that's like where I see it. You know,
the way you winced made it seem like a negative way when you said not in a negative way.
Not that straight to streaming movies are bad. I mean, we've watched a couple of good ones, but it's just like one of the ones like, oh, I had never heard of that. Oh, it's on streaming. Okay, it was probably cheap enough for them to buy the rights to. Like that's the kind of feeling that it has.
Yeah, I definitely think I would recommend this to someone that I didn't know was into the genre, like, and they weren't ready for it. I think I might suggest this. Oh, I don't even know. I was gonna say before Hereditary or The Witch, just to kind of ease into it before you kind of get into the real slow burners and the real art house ones. But yeah, I'm gonna stick with my term. I'm gonna stick with list adjacent is my official rating on a scale of 1 to 100. Is list adjacent.
What does that mean? That's your rating out of 100?
Yeah, it means like it's 100. It's 101 and it starts over. I don't know.
It starts over. But any last thoughts you guys have before we move on and close this out?
Not for me. I think we've kind of summarized the movie pretty well.
Cool. So let's go ahead and get into scores. Adrian, since you were the one who really you put this movie forward for the both of us. What did you score it at?
Wow, here I am actually having to define list adjacent. Wow, I really dug myself into a hole on this one. I've gone back and forth a lot on this. I definitely think, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just say my score. My score was a 72. I definitely think this is a film that does stand on its own and has its own kind of feel and its own character to it that is worth, I guess, watching and experiencing. But I definitely think there's other and quite a few films that definitely would be recommended before this.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, kind of in that artsy, kind of indie feeling sense. I would probably recommend Midsommar before this.
Yeah, this movie's like almost there. Like it almost has that status, but it didn't quite make it.
Sure. I'll disagree a little bit on my score. I went back and forth, trying to like really nail how I felt about this movie, and I was enjoying it up until the twist with the kids happened, and I feel like that was a little just disappointing. Overall, I gave it a 55. It's not a bad movie. This does have very good points in it. The performances, again, it's one of the things we didn't really talk about. The performances are pretty awesome in this movie. I think Jaden Martell, who was in It, and
that's where he's from. I spent the whole movie thinking I knew where that guy was from.
Yeah, like he has a future, definitely. And I love Richard Armitage, from The Hobbit to the criminally underwatched Castlevania series on Netflix. He's fantastic. But again, like kind of like Righteous Kill a couple weeks ago, and The Little Things. I kind of forgot I watched this movie 2 days later. So, but Scott, what did you end up giving this movie?
Yeah, so I rate the movies I watch on an app, and I gave us a 5 out of 10. And it's not like I don't view the rating system as like an 80 is like a B, and like there's like a C, and like failing is like below 60. Like my bell curve is like the bell is at a 5. So I felt like this movie tried to do things that other movies do better. and also at the same time, I was kind of pulled out of it because I wasn't necessarily engaged in the story, and that kind of always spoils it for me a little bit. But it wasn't a bad movie. 5 for me is not a bad movie. Like 2s and 3s are bad movies for me.
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat. We kind of rate the same way. And I do want to kind of mention your term. I remember watching kids. Whoa. Watching movies as a kid. Sorry, let's not clip that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow. Talk about the slip up of a century right there.
I'm gonna edit that so it goes like I watch kids.
You should. That'd be really funny, actually. No, but I remember watching movies as a kid with my dad, and anytime my dad would look at his watch, I would kind of subconsciously be like, "Oh, is this not interesting?" And I kind of associate the same thing with, or like, is it running too long? And I kind of associate it with what you're talking about, where anytime I like look at my phone or I do something, it's kind of a subconscious like ticker that says, "Oh, like, why am I not paying attention to this film?" And it is a red flag. So I do agree with your rating system and kind of your notion on that aspect of it.
Yeah. When I'm curious if you guys recommend a movie ever or a YouTube video, anything, and to someone, and then you're watching it with that someone. Do you care more about how that person is perceiving what you're watching them than just watching the thing?
Oh, 10.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I hate it.
As a market, I mean, Adrian and I both have the same thing. We both have marketing degrees, and I kind of think we both come at it from that aspect, right? Like when you want to see how people react, because that lets them know how good your thing is, even though it's not my thing. I didn't make the movie. I didn't make it, or a YouTube video, right? Like Adrian and I watch YouTube videos all the time, and together, and I always like to see how he reacts to the things that I put out. The reaction to me is better than the actual content the second time around, because I've already seen it at that point,
right?
Know, so it's not. I mean, depending on the movie, it's not as rewarding the second time. But I definitely think the reaction and their response is definitely more gratifying.
Yeah, I think for me specifically, like if I've seen it and I'm showing you, I really want you to watch it. And if you're on your phone, to me that is like I have failed in providing good content for you to watch. And my girlfriend is the exact opposite. She'll be on her phone and I'll go, "Hey, you should watch," and she goes, "Why aren't you watching the film? Why are you watching me watch the film?" And I'm over there like, just because if I laughed at a part, I want to see if you laugh at the part. And that's probably just maybe like a fault or something, but that is 100% how I show someone a film.
Yeah.
Are you the same way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I even do it in movie theaters too. I honestly, I even do it when I'm like, when I want to watch a film that I haven't seen before and I recommend it and I bring a friend along, even if I haven't seen it, I often am focusing on their enjoyment of it rather than my own. Because I feel like if I string someone along, if I bring them with, it's like their fate is in my hands. So yeah, definitely. It kind of ruins the experience a little bit now that I say it out loud.
No, I'd actually agree. I think there's something maybe all of us have, which is that like people pleaser aspect that comes with it, where like I am now your host in this film, and if you're having a bad time, I like need to acknowledge that and do something to stop it. But yeah, I'm definitely a no phones out while I watch a movie kind of person, or at least I try to be.
Absolutely.
And again, like we talked about, if I do find myself reaching for my phone or just doing something like playing with something like a pen or anything, I kind of acknowledge that, oh, I've lost interest in whatever's on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, earlier, Scott, you brought up a really good point about, when you said you gave the movie a 5, but you it's not a bad score, right? And that's something that Adrian and I really echo, right? Like I may give a movie a lower score, but we both realize that there's someone out there who this will be their favorite film, right? Mm-hmm. There's someone out there that will enjoy that no matter what. And so, I mean, the only movies I don't recommend are the ones I give like under a 22, right? Like, you should not watch Artemis Fowl. It is a horrible film. There's also...
But it does star Judi Dench, in case that changes anything for you.
You're right, yes. But like every movie out there, like, there's very few movies that I'd say don't watch it. Because there is... Someone's going to find something gratifying from it. And, Adrian and I, like you were saying earlier, have very positive mindsets, right? But kind of it's more related to the film itself, Like, I'm always eager, like, as much as I can critique something, there's always something that's worth pointing out and highlighting, right? Like, Transformers is arguably bad. It just is. But the visual
Megan
effects...
Fox.
But the visual effects and, like, the stunt teams and, like, the cinematography are, like, on point. Like, they're very well done. There's definitely people with talent working on these movies. It's just not all the pieces line up sometimes for us. And that's the part of the whole process of, reviewing and talking about film, is because it's an art form. Someone's going to enjoy it some other way.
I also want to, maybe you agree with this, Scott, maybe you don't, but when you're rating movies, I personally, and Garrett also agrees with this, but when I'm rating them, I definitely, like, if I give one movie a 70 and I give another movie a 75, I'm not giving them scores against each other. Like, every movie is graded on its own individual scale. Like, a film that isn't like a certain type of film in a certain genre might be a 10 out of 10 horror film, but, like, Casablanca, which I've never seen, might be a 10 out of 10 other type of film. So they aren't graded, like, against each other. It's not a competitive scoring.
Yeah. I've thought a lot about this.
Okay.
I try to rate them in a comparative way, but I realized some time ago that as I watch more movies, my standards are constantly changing. So it's kind of like an exercise in futility. But, like, I'll look at my recent reviews and I will go and tweak, like, a half star off or onto a rating because I gave something a different score. But I don't. It feels like a waste of time, just because, like, when I'm 50 years old, I'm gonna think, like, totally different thoughts about movies than when I am this age. So I don't know.
I think it's more like I rate it whatever I think right now, and that's it. Like, that's when I'll rate it, and that's how I felt, and that's how it'll be forever.
Yeah.
And there's definitely points to, like, you'll watch a movie again and your opinion will change. Like, that's part of the reason we did this podcast, is to watch movies that are older that, maybe we have changing opinions on. I mean, there's even some that I've gone in here and changed my opinion out, like, like, on the actual review process.
Yeah, like Tenet. Tenet was that for me. I watched it again with subtitles, and I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this more now.
I don't understand the whole muffled vocals as an artistic choice. I've watched so many videos on why that works, and I just don't. I don't get it. Theaters actually opened up for us to go see it, and I was able to go and watch it in theaters. And I remember like visibly and physically looking over and going, "Can you hear anything? Like, what is going on right now?"
Yeah. That was one of the movies I saw in 2020. I saw two movies. In January, I saw Uncut Gems, and then in, like, August or whenever it came out, I saw Tenet.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I think, in theaters at least, that was the only movie I actually saw last year.
One of the movies that we are kind of trying to go see in theaters is that new Tom Holland, Daisy Ridley movie about space. Yeah. There's some space. What is it called?
News to me.
No, I'm saying, like, we are going to try and see this?
No, Cassidy and I, my girlfriend.
Okay.
Okay. Garrett, you're not invited.
Well, you can come if you drive up here. I mean, you live a little far.
Yeah, I'm not good with a 16-hour round trip.
But there's, like, a couple of movies that are kind of at least either have people in them or are by certain people that to me are like, I want to go to that theater experience. I don't want to sit in my living room and watch it like I did Mulan. I feel like that takes a lot away from that experience.
Definitely. Yeah. But anything else you guys want to add before we close out this episode?
No.
I'm good.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on, Scott. It's nice having a third voice on the show to kind of bring up other points. We'd love to have you back on again if you're willing to come on. And I mean, who doesn't like to talk about movies, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But if someone maybe didn't make it to the end of the episode last week, where can people find you online?
Yeah, youtube.com/Miniac, twitch.tv/Miniac, and also I do a podcast about the art of miniature painting called Trapped Under Plastic.
Awesome.
Wow. Garrett, you should go on that podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
As a 6-month experience complete beginner, sure.
You would just watch. You just watch. That'd be the whole thing.
You're talking about wet blends and dry brushing, and I'm like, I once didn't water down my paints.
Yeah, it's relatable. It's relatable.
But thank you so much for coming on again, Scott.
Yeah.
That is going to bring us to the end of this episode of The Drive Back. Thank you so much for listening or watching. New episodes come out every Monday on your favorite podcasting app or here on YouTube for those visual fans among you. And that's pretty much it. Adrian, the little birdie told me that there's something that we always like to say.
Go watch a movie.
Sounds good.
Keep it simple.
There you go. So thank you so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time on The Drive Back. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Drive Back. Make sure to be on the lookout for new episodes every Monday, and make sure to follow us on social media.